The narrative lectionary continues our exploration of the Gospel of John. And many of these texts on Sundays in Lent are stories that we often hear during Holy Week. And so this gives us a chance to reflect on these passages earlier during these Sundays of Lent, and maybe to pause a little longer and see what we see and hear what we hear. And so our gospel lesson is John chapter 18, verses 12 through 27. Then the company of soldiers, the commander, and the guards from the Jewish leaders took Jesus into custody. They bound him and led him first to Annas. He was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jewish leaders that it was better for one person to die for the people. Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus. Because this other disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. However, Peter stood outside near the gate. Then the other disciple, the one known to the high priest, came out and spoke to the woman stationed at the gate, and she brought Peter in. The servant woman stationed at the gate asked Peter, "Aren't you one of this man's disciples?" "I'm not," he replied. The servants and the guards had made a fire because it was cold. They were standing around it, warming themselves. Peter joined them there, standing by the fire and warming himself. Meanwhile, the chief priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. Jesus answered, "I've spoken only to the world. I've always taught in synagogues and in the temple where all the Jews gather. I've said nothing in private. Why ask me? Ask those who heard what I told them. They know what I said." After Jesus spoke, one of the guards standing there slapped Jesus in the face. "Is that how you would answer the high priest?" he asked. Jesus replied, "If I speak wrongly, testify about what was wrong. But if I speak correctly, why do you strike me?" Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Meanwhile, Simon Peter was still standing with the guards, warming himself. They asked him, "Aren't you one of his disciples?" Peter denied it, saying, "I'm not." A servant of the high priest, a relative of the one whose ear Peter had cut off, said to him, "Didn't I see you in the garden with him?" Peter denied it again, and immediately a rooster crowed. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. As I mentioned, we don't normally read this story on a Sunday morning. We are more likely to hear it read in the quiet, darkened sanctuary on a Maundy, Thursday evening or a Good Friday. And there's a part of us that would rather not listen. And there's a part of us that would rather look away. It's painful to watch Peter denying Jesus. And when that rooster crows, it pierces us to our core. All four gospel writers tell this story. All four gospel writers have Jesus warning Peter that before the rooster crows, Peter will have denied him 3 times. And all four gospel writers have Peter emphatically denying that he would ever deny Jesus, which makes it all the more heart-wrenching when he actually does. And it's not just the voyeurism of watching Peter on the worst night of his life that bothers us. It's also the recognition of something of ourselves in Peter. It's the realization that we too have failed to keep promises. It's one thing for a politician to say, "Read my lips, no new taxes," and then go back on that pledge. But it's quite another for you and I to realize that we have failed to keep promises to the very ones we love the most. We can think of friendships that died because one friend failed to live up to his or her word. And how many parents are brave enough to ask whether they have kept all of their promises to their children, especially when the children are grown? And in the gospel writer Luke's version of the story, at that moment of Peter's third denial, the rooster crows, and the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had said to him, "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." And Peter went out and wept bitterly. Can you imagine that look? Do you remember anyone ever looking at you like that? It's a look that needs no words. It's a look that says, "Peter, now you know and you know that I know what a fraud and traitor you are." It's a look that strips away the covers from the various defenses that you and I use with greater and lesser success to deceive ourselves into thinking what nice people we are. Perhaps there is or there was someone in your life who had a certain look. They could simply look at you in a certain way and convey the purest essence of disappointed love. And Peter has sworn and denied ever knowing Jesus, and then Jesus looks at him. Now, the Gospel of John tells the story a little differently than the other 3 Gospels. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Peter denies having been with Jesus or knowing Jesus. But in John, Peter denies being Jesus' disciple. Now, that might seem like a subtle distinction, but in John's account, Peter isn't simply denying that he's been with Jesus. He is denying something about himself. He is denying his own identity as a disciple. And as Peter stands over a charcoal fire, desperately trying to warm himself, he doesn't know who he is anymore. And just as seen earlier, Peter had drawn a sword and was ready to fight the Roman soldiers and others who had come to arrest Jesus. Peter had swung his sword and slashed off the ear of the high priest's slave. Now, why do you suppose it is that Peter was brave enough to fight the Roman soldiers who had come to arrest Jesus, but apparently not brave enough to admit that he was Jesus' disciple in front of the others who were warming themselves over the fire? We might say that instinctual violence is easier than testimony. It's simply easier for Peter to swing his sword than it is for him to admit that he's Jesus' disciple. That might be it. But I suspect that there's another reason. Perhaps it was because Peter himself was heartbroken. According to Brene Brown, heartbreak is what happens when love is lost, or there is a perceived loss of love. Peter was ready to defend Jesus with a sword. You can't say that Peter wasn't brave. He was brave. But Jesus told Peter to put away the sword, and then Jesus was immediately taken into custody. And for Peter, that must have been a heartbreaking moment. For Peter, the teacher that he loved and adored had just allowed himself to be captured, with the end result that the teacher would most likely be put to death. How utterly heartbreaking and heart-wrenching to give up without a fight. It's a heartbreaking loss of love because the teacher that Peter loved is about to die. Think back to 4 years ago when Russia first invaded Ukraine, or in recent history first invaded Ukraine. If President Zelensky had simply fled to Poland early on or quickly surrendered, it would have been heartbreaking and devastating for the Ukrainian people. The Ukrainian troops likely would have lost the will to fight early on. Many Ukrainian citizens might have lost the will to resist, but instead, Zelensky resolved to remain there and keep fighting. Or let's say that you and your partner are involved in a passionate cause that's always been important to you, and you've been willing to advocate that, even to the point of litigation if necessary. You've always been willing to do whatever you can to fight for this very important cause. And then let's say that one day your partner just abruptly decides to stop fighting. It's heartbreaking. Maybe Peter denied being a disciple of Jesus because he didn't know what it would mean to be a disciple of a leader who gave up. And heartbreak leads to more heartbreak, and when Peter denies that he is Jesus' disciple, it is Jesus' heart that gets broken. And for many of us, there is a charcoal fire somewhere in our lives. We have stood over that fire, desperately trying to warm ourselves and wishing even more desperately that we could undo what we have just done. The hard truth is that we cannot undo it, but we can experience forgiveness and restoration. In the words of one preacher, at the very heart of family life lies the need for forgiveness. Our families, whether families of origin or families of choice, or even our church family, are crucibles in which failure and forgiveness must be worked out. In our nuclear families, family life can be healthy when spouses or partners seek one another's forgiveness, when parents forgive children, and parents model forgiveness so that children will learn how to do it. For the time will inevitably come when our children must forgive us. And forgiveness is not cheap. It is not easy. It always costs the forgiver, and it cost Jesus everything. And the look that Jesus gave to Peter was not just a look of judgment or disappointed love. I would say that even more than that, it was a look of reconciling love. And in John's version of the story, there is another scene with a charcoal fire. And this is in chapter 21 of John. This is after Jesus' resurrection. Peter decides to go fishing, perhaps because he's not certain what else to do. But all through the night, Peter and the other disciples failed to catch any fish. And then when it's almost dawn, a stranger on the shore calls out to them and tells them to cast their nets on the other side. And they're kind of reluctant, but they do it anyway. And then all of a sudden they catch more fish than they can possibly handle. And the moment that Peter realizes that the stranger on the shore is Jesus, Peter jumps off the boat and swims to the shore. And when he gets there, Jesus is already cooking some fish over a charcoal fire. And 3 different times, Jesus asks Peter if he loves him. And 3 different times, Peter says, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." 3 affirmations of love that now take the place of 3 denials. In place of that haunting memory of the old charcoal fire, there is now the memory of this new one, a charcoal fire from which Jesus prepares the very sustenance that Peter and the disciples need. And it may be that you have recently experienced forgiveness and restoration, that you have experienced some measure of healing for your own broken heart. Or it might be that the forgiveness you have sought has not yet come. Or that the forgiveness that others seek from you is not easily given because the wounds are too deep. And the last thing that you need to hear from some well-meaning Christian is about how all Christians are supposed to forgive and forget. Forgiveness cannot be rushed. And it may be that we need to spend the entire sleepless night on the boat first. But what I do believe by faith is that one day we will hear the voice of the stranger telling us where to cast our net, and once we've caught our haul of fish, inviting us to have breakfast on the lake shore. And as we gather around that charcoal fire, the stranger will feed us with bread and fish and heal our broken hearts. All glory and praise be to our God. Amen.